This will be my last video on this channel for 2020. Head over to Paul MichaelDB where I'll upload my 1700th video ever. There, coming before the end of the year, it will be my last video of 2020 and maybe forever. No guarantees I'll return in 2021. In this video I'll talk about wrestling for the last time as I get through my top 5s from Royal Rumble 2001 to the time when I should have stopped watching fake fights. He has more videos than subscribers. He's one of the few on here without a PayPal. This isn't work. He's simply here to entertain. 11 years in a row. It's the Paul MichaelDB show. Royal Rumble 2001 was the legit last time I felt legitimately excited for a wrestling show. I was excited for WrestleMania 17 too, but it was more nervousness than excitement because I did not want Steve Austin to lose to The Rock. Oh, those Austin Mark days. Some would say Kane deserves #1 spot on this show, but I disagree. My #1 goes to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho also had an outstanding ladder match here. No Way Out featured the best 3 Stages of Hell match that I can recall between Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Triple H going over here, and here he was finally, seen as an actual threat to Steve Austin and The Rock, storyline-wise. I've talked about WrestleMania 17 to death on my video series. What more can be said? The best wrestling pay-per-view ever. Backlash 2001 fell a bit flat following a solid start to the year pay-per-view wise. Shane McMahon gets my #1 spot here for that quite insane bump he took. William Regal is #4 in my Insurrection 2001 UK exclusive glorified house show event. His feud with Chris Jericho was at its peak here and was a very entertaining feud of that. Judgment Day 2001 had a solid main event with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker, but the 2 men that stole the show for me was Kurt Angle in second place and Chris Benoit. They had an excellent encounter on this show, and Chris Benoit would go on to wrestle in another matchup and win the tag team titles. Or a shot for the tag team titles, I apologize. King of the Ring 2001 was a stacked show. Kurt Angle, he was the MVP of the night, had the best streak fight I've ever seen between him and Shane McMahon. There was a solid triple threat match between Steve Austin, Chris Benoit, and Chris Jericho. Also, it was a fun start for DDP's in-ring, if you will, WWE career here against The Undertaker. A lot of people say Invasion was the worst pay-per-view of all time. It's close to being the worst. 4 out of 10 from me. Definitely the most disappointing pay-per-view ever. The main event of this show was The Rock versus Booker T, but the best match by far for me was Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle for the WWF Championship. Their feud, it had its problems. Steve Austin was a bit too much of a coward for my liking during the end of this feud. But I just can't, you can't portray heel or face Steve Austin as a coward. That's ridiculous. Anyways, but their match here and several of their matches during this feud were very, very good. I didn't like Unforgiven much, and it has nothing to do with Steve Austin tapping out in the middle of the ring. His hand was underneath the ropes, Didn't count. WWF No Mercy 2001 was one of the greatest pay-per-views ever. Featured 2 great title matches, one triple threat match between Austin, RVD, and Angle, and the other that was even better between Chris Jericho and The Rock. Chris Jericho really looked strong at the end of this show. The single pay-per-view rematch between Steve Austin and The Rock from WrestleMania 17 took place at a UK exclusive pay-per-view named Rebellion. God, those fans were lucky, weren't they? This should have taken place at SummerSlam or Survivor Series. What a waste. Survivor Series 2001 was a solid show and, in my opinion, contains the greatest traditional Survivor Series elimination match pitting Team Austin versus Team Rock. This was the night where Chris Jericho beat The Rock and Steve Austin on the same night. I thought it was garbage, didn't do Jericho any favors, but at least it featured a decent hardcore match between The Undertaker and RVD. I'm no Triple H mark, but the sight of him returning here, this was his return match, the Rumble match, did give me chills, I will admit. God, that was painful. Also, this Royal Rumble match featured probably the most memorable elimination of all time when Maven eliminated The Undertaker. For the first time in nearly 9 years, Hulk Hogan was back in the WWF. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash also returned, but for me it was all about Hulk Hogan. Dave Meltzer rated like a Young Bucks match higher than The Rock versus Hollywood Hulk Hogan, which was one of the top 3 matches of all time. There could be an argument made for it being the best. Clearly Dave Meltzer doesn't know what he's talking about. Hulk Hogan winning here was a feel-good moment. I watched it live like I did many of these shows during this time. It would have been, I think I would have quit watching wrestling right there and then if Triple H had won this thing. Another throwaway glorified house show I think was best remembered for the plane trip afterwards where Scott Hall and Mr. Perfect were released, fired, whatever. It also featured perhaps the worst Undertaker Triple H match that I've seen, and that was the best thing about the show. The reality of Hollywood Hulk Hogan past his peak came here at this show, Judgment Day. Kurt Angle was also shaved bald and became a new man. The greatest of all time, Stone Cold Steve Austin, had walked out at this point, but the next big thing had arrived. And he arguably is the second greatest wrestler of all time, in my opinion. Perhaps number 1. Yes, Brock Lesnar. Vengeance 2002 had no right to be this good. It featured a hell of a triple threat match, one of the best triple threat matches I've ever seen between The Rock, Kurt Angle, and The Undertaker. Does anybody know the name of the song used in build-up here for the Triple H Shawn Michaels match? It gave me goosebumps. This match was outstanding. One of the best in Shawn Michaels' career. This was his comeback match. It also featured any other show. This would have been the top match, but I mean, Shawn Michaels is so good. What can I say? But it also featured a great main event between The Rock and Brock Lesnar. Fans booed at the end of the main event of this show, but I thought it was a great match, and you know what the ending set up? A great Hell in a Cell match between Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. This match carried No Mercy 2002 to a 10 out of 10. Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker was arguably the best feud of the early 2000s, the whole 2000s, actually. I honestly can't even remember what happened at this show, but apparently I thought Kurt Angle was number 1 of this UK glorified house show. I think this is the Last Rebellion show. Woohoo! One of the greatest, actually I think this is the greatest Survivor Series pay-per-view of all time. It doesn't even feature one traditional Survivor Series elimination match, which I love, but this show was stacked from top to bottom. Kudos to Triple H for keeping going following that horrendous RVD botch in the Elimination Chamber match. I did wonder, rewatching these shows, if RVD got punished for that major botch at the Survivor Series. Well, he did, as you'll see. Was he even wrestling at this show? Oops. A disappointing overall Royal Rumble show, but it did feature an outstanding match between Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. The greatest No Way Out show ever, possibly? What a stacked card and a hell of a return from Stone Cold Steve Austin. I literally never thought I would see him in a WWE ring again at the time, and to see this, and to see him come out, that huge pop he received from the Canadian crowd, what a moment. What a moment. I honestly felt like I was on something watching this show. What energy this show has! And wow, I can see why. I didn't appreciate this show at the time. I thought the Austin Rock match was their third best at WrestleMania, but I mean, Shawn Michaels wrestling, Hulk Hogan wrestling, Brock Lesnar wrestling, Steve Austin wrestling his what would be his last match. This was like as close to wrestling heaven as you could get in this world. One of the best moments from a quite a failed original WWE run here for Goldberg, who was an absolute beast in WCW, but one of the better moments he had was his main event match with The Rock here at Backlash. Very average show, but you should watch it anyway just to see Brock Lesnar driving a forklift in his stretcher match with the Big Show. I think this was the final Insurrection show. Thank the Lord, I don't need to watch one of these again. Kevin Nash and Triple H basically had the same match they would at Bad Blood, without Hell in a Cell and without Mick Foley. Another awful glorified house show. Bad Blood 2003 was all about creating new and fresh stars, as you can see by my top 5 here. Once again, Vengeance has another memorable and great triple threat match. I didn't think it was as good as previous year's triple threat match, but it was still very solid work here from the Big Show, Brock Lesnar, and Kurt Angle. This was Goldberg's best moment in his original run in the WWE. Seeing him go through Randy Orton, Chris Jericho, and Shawn Michaels in such a quick session was really like jaw dropping at the time and really fun. I loved the moment when Ric Flair is trying to hold the elimination door closed to try and protect Triple H from Bill Goldberg, and he lets Bill Goldberg know he's number one. It was, yeah, all good stuff here. This show was a hard sit through. The best moment of the night was the match between Shane McMahon and Kane, and it actually wasn't that great either. Felt a bit, I don't know, too choreographed for my liking. We went from 10 out of 10 No Mercy pay-per-views in 2001 and 2002 to a 6 out of 10 here in 2003. The biker chain match just wasn't as epic as the Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar from the previous year here. I love Survivor Series 2003, a very underappreciated show which features a match, traditional Survivor Series elimination match, the second best one ever. It was all about Stone Cold Steve Austin, his career as Raw GM was on the line here, but Shawn Michaels stole the show and had one of the best performances of his career here, and this was just incredible work by Shawn Michaels. One of the worst pay-per-views I've rewatched. Shawn Michaels had a match with Batista. Batista wasn't quite ready, but was still the best part of this show. The Royal Rumble 2004 featured one of the greatest Royal Rumble matches of all time. Memorable spots from Goldberg, Mick Foley, and Randy Orton here, and Chris Benoit was the MVP of the night. Eddie Guerrero got his moment here at No Way Out 2004, winning his first WWE Championship, but apart from that, a very forgettable show. WrestleMania 20, where it all began again. This is where my wrestling phase should have ended. I was 16 years old at the time and too old to be watching fake fights. But I would continue watching wrestling through the years, despite John Cena's best efforts, and even attending a WrestleMania in 2009 and continuing to watch it now and again from that point to see if The Undertaker would lose at WrestleMania finally, and to see what on earth Brock Lesnar was up to when he returned. Apart from that, I've really disliked wrestling from 2004 onwards.